Hello everyone, my name is Dave with Dimension Data's Innovation Team. Today we're going to show you a solution based on Velostrata which moves workloads from different clouds such as Google Cloud Platform. This solution is going to encompass VMware vSphere, Fortinet, as well as on-prem Hyperflex. Okay, let's jump right into it. Right here we have a Google Cloud Platform console session, and what we need to do is actually create a VPC. In this case I've already created one, but let's go ahead and take a look at some of the settings associated with this. So for this we've actually created this VPC network located in US West 2. Let's open that up, get you some details associated with that. So as you can see, we've created the VPC network, the region, the IP address base, gateway, and some parameters associated with that. So that's kind of our first step in this process, is actually assigning a VPC. The next thing that we're going to actually do is prep the environment for Velostrata. So there's some stuff that we need to do within Google Cloud Platform to actually install that. So the first thing we're going to do is actually activate the Cloud Shell. And this is going to take a couple of minutes as they provision the Cloud Shell for the interface associated with that. Now you could look at Cloud Shell just as a regular shell in everything you do from a Linux perspective. Okay, so you see we have it up. So I'm in my project that I've associated with the VPC right here. Now what we actually need to do in order to install the Velostrata appliance is actually navigate to another directory. So I'm going to do that now. And this is going to be in Google, Velostrata. Okay, so here we are. Now there's a couple commands that we actually need to run for setup scripts. Now you can do this manually, but thankfully Velostrata has actually produced some of the credentials that we actually need. So when we go through the setup script, it's actually going to create IAM rules and specific credentialing associated with that, as well as starting to tag the Velostrata appliance. So that way Google knows what it is, we know what it is as far as some of that traffic and how it's tagged. And I'm just going to kind of demonstrate this because it's already deployed, but to give you an idea of what that script actually looks like. And you could get this on docs.velostrata.com. So right now I'm in the Google directory under Velostrata, so I'm going to go sudo, and in this case the vernacular should actually be deploy, not deployment. So once I run this command, it will start to deploy Velostrata in GCP. So once that's done, what we're going to do is now go to create some firewall rules, because we need to dictate how the appliance is actually going to talk within our VPC and throughout. So we actually have to create some firewall rules. In this particular case, you can see some of the ranges associated with Velostrata and the workload. These are assumed by actually putting tags. That way we can actually tag that traffic and it's recognized. So you can see some tags associated with workload and Velostrata as we go through. In this case, it's actually we're allowing ping through so that we can actually communicate. So there's rules associated with that. We also have SSH rules. That way we can actually go into a VM and actually administrate that via SSH. But you can see some of these is associated with what network addresses that they actually come from. So after we kind of create these rules, then what we actually need to do is actually create a VPN connection between GCP and on-prem. In this case, it's going to be Fortinet. So what we're going to do is navigate to hybrid connectivity, go to VPN. In this particular case, what we did is actually created a cloud router and associated a tunnel with it and did some BGP peering. So I'm going to drill down into this so you can take a look. You can see the peer address, the network, which is what we talked about, the VPC that we previously created in US West 2, the IP address associated with it, and you can actually see the routing type and the cloud router that's actually associated with that, and the BGP session as well as the IKE keys associated with that. So we're actually going to drill down to cloud router so you can take a look at what that is. So we've kind of named this, in this case it's GCP 48300D. And you can see the session that we were just in, the Fortinet session, the peer ASN, as well as the BGP IP associated with that. And obviously the destination IP addresses, which coincide with our VPC network associated with that. So you can see that we've actually created this and we get a green check mark. So now let's go to the on-prem side to see how we actually have that configured on the FortiGate. Going down to IPsec tunnels. See, we have a custom. I have two different ones because I was playing with different iterations. One is actually a point-to-point. This one's obviously utilizing BGP. So let's drill down into what actually that entails. So you can see the static IP address, which then coincides with Google IP address, right, associated with that. Pre-shared key. So if I edit this, edit these, you could actually see that we have specific phase 1 proposals, those being AES 256 and SHA-1, the lifetime associated with. These are actually posted by GCP and Fortinet, specific to creating the appropriate VPN. And in this case, since we're now peering and letting BGP do all the routing associated with it, we've now put in quad zeros across the board for local and remote address, so that way we can peer and those routing tables are updated between GCP and Fortinet. So if we drill down a little bit further on that, let's go to the network so you can actually see what the BGP session looks like, or configuration rather. Here's our local AS and GCP, just add number 4, that's the private ASN that these guys peer to, and the router ID is associated with them, as you can see right here. And then here are the networks corresponding to our on-prem that we're actually advertising through this actual VPN tunnel. So you can see that we've done this. And I did mess around with some of the other parameters within, redistributing connected and static associated with that, but we're having some challenges. So what we did is just add those right here to those networks, which then resolve them. And interestingly, what we see in documentation is that Google prefers actually doing a cloud router as opposed to a static. Okay, one last thing that we need to look at on the FortiGate is allocating the firewall rule sets to allow traffic from GCP to our hybrid on-prem solution in our innovation lab. So what we need to do is create those firewall rules to allow that traffic back and forth. So what we're going to do is just quickly drill down to that as it loads. So as you can see here, we've created 2 rules for bidirectional traffic. In this case, I've named the GCP in, which includes our tunnel interface, as you can see here, as well as our outgoing interface. We have 3 different in Innovation Lab. And then to the remote subnet that we've created within GCP for our project. So that'll be 10.241.0.0. And then, of course, the destination on our end associated with that. And then lastly, the other rule set associated with that, which gives us that bidirectional traffic. So as you can see here, we've done the same here to allow that traffic through. Actually create a VM to actually test some of the connectivity between those, between the VPN tunnel, just to get an idea to make sure that everything's working. So right here, I'm going to bring up my VM instances. You can actually see that we have actually a Velostrata Edge node already kind of provisioned, and that's on pause. And we'll talk a little bit about that. But right now, let's create an instance real quick. In this case, I'm going to be very original and keep it instance 1. And let's go to US West 2. I think we're good with the image. We're just going to verify that. Yep, we don't need anything special here. Let's drill down, because what we actually want to do is add that to our region, and more importantly, our VPC associated with that. So we click on the networking tag. See how it says default? That's what we want to actually change. So what we're going to do is hit the edit button, and we're going to go down to our VPC that we have it in. You can see it gives you an ephemeral IP address associated with it, and off we go. Since this is going to be a base build, we're going to be done. Now let's create that. You'll see that actually spinning up here in a minute. Okay, so now what we're going to do is actually drill down into one of these VMs that we have on-prem called the CMS, which is a content management system based on Concrete 5 and old LAMP stack. So let's drill in and see if we can actually communicate on-prem to GCP and then vice versa. So we're going to do this ping. Looks like it actually took, if you look here, 10.241.0.4. Let's go here, and that's our instance that we just created. Now if I go here to our instance, let's see if we can ping it on the other end. So let's open up in a browser window, see if we're successful to SSH in. This usually takes a little bit of time to set up. And sometimes you also have to make sure that your firewalls are actually set up for SSH, which obviously sometimes even myself I forget about. So let's go down here and make sure that our firewalls rules are in place. It looks like they are, but let's just double check anywhere so you can see where we actually put in that. So you can actually see right here. This is for SSH, default, allow, all, but there's also another SSH down here, right here, as you can see, associated with that. And we also allowed a port 80 and 8080 for this actual test. All right, so let's go back here. And let's try to ping. In this case, the on-prem IP should be. And there we go. So now what we've done is actually verified that we have bidirectional communication via VPN from GCP to on-prem. So great. That's almost half the battle right there. So next is actually to deploy the Velostrata appliance within VMware. So in this particular case, what we would actually do is deploy from an OVF template. And we're going to browse to a local file. Downloads, and that should be right here. So open that guy. And then this is when we'd start the process and where we're going to, what data center we're going to apply it to, etc. As you can see, I have a little error because we actually have it deployed, but I want to show you kind of what that looks like. Okay, so some important things to note as we actually deploy the Velostrata appliance on-prem. And I'm actually going to drill down to this here, and let's edit it so you can actually see kind of what the VApp configuration looks like a little bit. All right, so let's look at the VApp options here. Now, I think I'm going to actually have to turn it off in order to change it, but there's some networking properties actually very important for here. One of the most important things that we have to actually remember, and I just skipped this in the first time, is actually creating a DNS entry that actually resolves to something. And the reason why is because the Velostrata appliance actually goes out to call for Google APIs to actually interact and deploy the appliance, as well as some scripts associated with it. So it's really important. Outside of that, our normal network connectivity, obviously need connectivity to actually communicate, as well as getting an understanding of what the product appliance is. In this case, it'll be the default Velostrata appliance, etc. So that's kind of some of the lessons learned, because we had to do some troubleshooting on this to figure out why it wasn't communicating. Okay, so now let's say we have that actually deployed. One of the things, if you note previous in the demonstration, is actually setting up service accounts. When we actually go to deploy this appliance itself, we actually need credentials associated with it. So what happens is there are service accounts that are actually created in so that way Velostrata can actually talk. Now for that, when you go through the creation process, which I'm going to go through in a minute after the deployment, you actually have to generate some keys based on JavaScript. So in this case, we actually use the service account and management service account associated with that. And what you do is actually create a key. That'll create a JSON file, which you then import into Velostrata, which is actually here. So right here, I'm at the home settings. As you start to deploy this appliance, first things you need to do is create the targeted cloud. In this case, as you can see, is GCP and the VCP associated with that. Then you create the cloud credentials. So that would be from what we would do here and creating a key within Google Cloud Platform and the service account associated with it. and then you go and create, and then put in the cloud provider credentials, and then attach the JSON file associated with it. Hope that makes sense. So see that. Now, the other part that you actually need to do within Velostrata is now have the vCenter plugin associated with that. So we go to System Settings, and this is where we would put in our vCenter address as well as the user and the credentials associated with that. As you can see here, you can see the network settings associated with the appliance that we actually put forth within the setup procedure. All right, so now that we're going to make sure that we have a Velostrata that's actually deployed within our cluster here, or data center rather, let's go ahead and scroll down to this guy, this puppy. And so I think I can find him. There he is. And if you go to summary page, you get an understanding of how the plugin's actually working. In this particular case, we go to the high level data center, go to summary tab. And as you can see right here, you can see that our deploy was successful within GCP. What size, what the region is, and what VPC and edge nodes there are. And we could obviously confirm this when we go down to here, go to GCP, go to Cloud Engine to see VM instances, etc. You'll see that these guys are paused right now. So let's spin these puppies up. And we'll do that by actually initiating a workload. Now, here's something really cool within Velostrata that's killer, that helps you kind of understand what the costs are associated with. Now, there's a feature within Velostrata. As I go to right-click and go to Velostrata Operations, you can see that we have the ability to start usage monitoring. So that basically tells us, hey, how do I right size an appliance within GCP so I'm not overpaying for what I might potentially move over there. So I think that's a really good feature. Now Velostrata will do this to everybody, every VM that you decide to actually enable this feature. In this case, we're going to use a content management system that we talked about before. So in this case, let's go through the process of migrating to GCP. Click on migrate. You can see that we've already have our target within our VPC and GCP. See the VM cloud name right here. So I'm going to go ahead and click next. Our cloud instance information. And here's where that feature comes in, which is to actually kind of monitor that. Now it's actually, as you can see, Velostrata is actually giving us a kind of cost comparison on what that looks like on a monthly cost pay-as-you-go. In this case, you can see it's very small, so I'm going to continue to have one CPU with 1.7 gigs of RAM, because obviously that's going to be cheaper for us. One storage policy. In this case, we have two different options. One's write back, which tracks all reads and writes if it's either on-prem or off-prem. In this case, I've actually made a clone of my CMS. So you'll see that it's CMS2 right here. So I'm gonna isolate that. That way, basically all that's isolated, and if I lose it, I lose it. I lose the changes from when on-prem to off-prem, etc. In that case, I don't mind because I've already done a clone. Tag workloads, as we talked about previously within the VPC firewall feature sets, the service account associated with that, and we're going to let GCP decide the IP. And I'm going to make sure that the external IP itself is ephemeral. Let me hit next. I don't need SSD because I don't need performance, so I'm going to stick with standard disk type. I'm going to leverage the Velostrata worker service account, hit next again. And this gives us kind of a summary of what's going to be deployed. So I'm going to finish, and we're going to start rolling. As you can see on the recent tasks, this is starting to spin up. We're starting to create the scripts from CMS, from the cloud extension, and we're going to be off. Okay, so while Velostrata is migrating the CMS workload, let's go and take a brief look at the on-prem, just so you can see the combination solution and technologies involved within this. So the on-prem solution actually composes of, we talked about Fortinet as one piece, Cisco Hyperflex as another piece, for our hyper-converged infrastructure, as well as our software-defined network from a data center perspective, and that's based on ACI, Cisco ACI. So what we're going to do is just drill in real quick so you can see all these workloads to the left here actually mirror on the other side. So if I go to Hyperflex, for instance, go to dashboard, you can kind of see what's going on here. But then as I drill down on virtual machines, you'll see that we have the same exact instances here, abstracted from vSphere and then brought into this iframe on Hyperflex. So as you can see right here, like for instance, if I just were to pick one, we'll do a Kubernetes cluster right here, let's say ACI for instance, K8S. If I go here, you should see it there. So you see all the workers and master. Okay, now if I drill into Cisco ACI 2 and I go to tenants, and let's go to where these are actually housed. Close that real quick. Go into my application network profiles, go here. Go into my IB management, and then if I go to operation tab, you can see all these endpoints being learned as well. These are also the same. These are a little different from MAC address perspective, but nonetheless the same. All right, so now let's go back here. You can see we're getting really close. Oh, so now we've actually completed. Perfect. All right, so let's go to Google, and you actually see CMS right here. Perfect. So you can see we have actually new IP address associated with that. So with the CMS system, let's see, it looks like it's online and working. It's got an IP address. Okay, so what we want to do is now test that this is actually a real VM, because I know sometimes people don't always get a lot of content in some of these demonstrations. So what we're going to do is, you can see that I've actually moved this over here, and here's the ephemeral IP associated with it. So if I go here, we should get some kind of content management. So let's take a look. Hopefully this will work. Here you go. So this is our kind of our innovation team site. So you can see that we have now ported over the CMS system. If we go back to vSphere, you'll see that kind of little green boxes here. That means it's capturing its state, but that state now exists in GCP, as you can see here. If I wanted, like for instance, if I wanted to scroll to some projects that we're working on, I can see here. So as you can see, this actually is a full working CMS site associated with that that our innovation team works on. So you can actually see that that workload actually moved. So this is fantastic, right? So woo, great. So we've actually moved our first workload over. And so let's also drill down some of the other Velostrata capabilities. Now I showed you kind of how that workload has moved over time. Here's some other killer things that it can actually do. Runbook automation. So for instance, that was one more workload, but I can actually now do that with a lot of different workloads. So I can create a runbook based on what pulls from vSphere in this particular case. Let's go find it. Too many tabs. I can create a new runbook. Loads from vSphere. Here's the data center associated with it, and then here's essentially our VPC, right? So I can populate it with cloud extension defaults. I'm going to go ahead and create this. So I'll open with Excel instead. And it'll take a minute to open up here. Great. So now you can see it gives us an idea of what kind of workloads there are, what OS type, what number of CPUs are, etc., and obviously target. So this gives us an opportunity to now start do a bulk move to GCP for these and automate some of that procedure. And it shows you where the target is, Google APIs, etc., associated with it. So this is a really good tool that we can actually use from a runbook perspective. So how would that look like is that you would start a new job, and we'd say test run, something similar, right? Then so there it is. Then I'd open it. It's like the operation in this case, run in cloud, or I could test clone it, move it back, delete clone, full migration. So there's a lot of different things we can do. So in this particular case, what we most likely do is, because I'm a cautious guy, I'd probably do a test clone, and then from that run in cloud. Once you run in cloud and you're comfortable with it, then what you can do is do a detach and then clean up. So once you do a detach and clean up, then there's no kind of going back. Obviously, Velostrata gives you some options where you can actually move that back. As you can see right here, move back option. Well, that's going to basically wrap it up. I really appreciate the time. Hopefully you made it through 27 plus minute demonstration of Velostrata with our hybrid cloud on-prem solution, including FortiGate, Cisco Hyperflex, Cisco ACI, and of course GCP. If you have any other questions, please hit us up at am.innovation.team@dimensondata.com. We'd love to go into a further deeper dive. Didn't want to bloviate and basically spread this out another half an hour. So thanks again. Appreciate it.